Alright, so I recently put out a video with my favorite boss from each Souls game, and now I want to talk about my least favorite bosses in each game. As usual, I'll be going in order of the game's release, which means we have Demon Souls up first. Now, to be clear, I think most of the boss fights in this game are pretty trash, but I don't know if I hated any boss more than Leechmonger. He's just this big blob that shoots leeches at you. His gimmick is that you're supposed to use fire, or magic, because magic is OP as hell in Demon Souls, but this fight is so annoying to try to induce straight up because you have to fight him on this small mound and he's just a big ass blob, so his moves are kinda hard to telegraph. He's also in the Valley of Defilement, which is probably the shittiest area in the game, and the run back for this boss is horrendous, so that is also another major factor. To be fair, most of the runbacks in this game suck, but that one is super bad. So you do a horrible run back just to get cooked by the boss in seconds because you have to stand on a small platform and try and deal damage and hope the leeches don't hit you. Because if they do, they will slowly bleed your health. He can also regen his health, so that is obviously also annoying to deal with. The liquid surrounding the boss is also full of leeches that will drain your health, so it's much like a Grohl and Silksong type situation where if you fall in the water, you're in big trouble. Truly, everything about this boss, from the run back to the mechanics to the design, really just rubbed me the wrong way. It's easily my least favorite boss in a game full of awful bosses. Next up, we have Dark Souls 1. Thankfully, the bosses in this game were a massive step up from Demon Souls. I actually really enjoyed a lot of the boss fights in this game, and none really pissed me off all that much. I thought they were all pretty fun for the most part, except for one. There was really only one boss fight that I loathed entirely, and that was Bed of Chaos. Now, you might say putting a gimmick boss on a list like this is a cop-out, but damn it, this is my list, and Bed of Chaos was the only boss fight where if I could have handed the controller over to someone else to beat it, I would have. In Demon Souls, I looked up some guides because those bosses all had a gimmick to them, and I could just not be asked to figure out said gimmick after my first couple attempts because I did not enjoy my time with that game. But I'm proud to say that in all the other games, I figured stuff out on my own, which means I had to trial and error this boss like a motherfucker. Now look, I love platformer games, I grew up on them, and there are a few genres more satisfying than a proper platformer with really tight controls. Like Path of Pain and Hollow Knight, hell yeah, I love stuff like that. But in a Souls game, especially the first Souls game, where you jumped by sprinting and then double tapping the sprint button, well, that was about as clunky of controls as you can get. I did not play Dark Souls to do platforming, I played it to fight bosses. Bed of Chaos is more of a jumping puzzle than an actual fight, but with how clunky the controls are, it just really didn't work. I'm not a fan of this fight at all. Even now, with knowing what to do, I still would not want to fight that shitty boss. If I were to do a repeat playthrough, this would be the one I would dread the most. Up next, we have Dark Souls 2. This game actually has a lot of shitty bosses now that I'm recalling my experience with a lot of them, but at the same time, none stand out like Bed of Chaos where I was just hating my life fighting the boss for a long time. In fact, it's almost the opposite. Some were so piss easy, I couldn't tell if it was a boss fight. Looking at you, Prowling Magus and Congregation. Like, what a lame-ass boss that is. Again, some were really awful just because they barely felt like bosses, but the only one that gave me any trouble and annoyed me in a way like Leechmonger or Bed of Chaos was the Royal Rat Authority. There are a handful of small rats to deal with at the start of this fight, and these guys sort of gank you and they apply poison to you. You have to get them down ASAP before the actual boss comes down to fight you. But this was Dark Souls 2, so you don't have near the same amount of stamina and agility to dodge around and take out groups of enemies with ease. No, this gameplay is much slower and clunkier, so it's honestly pretty challenging. It was mostly just a dice roll of if you could take them out before the boss aggroes onto you and kills you. I'm just not a fan of this type of fight. I don't even like ad waves before a boss fight when it's done well, like in Silksong. Scarsinger Carmelita would probably be my favorite fight in the entire game if it didn't have the ad wave beforehand. But having to slog through a bunch of enemies just to fight the real big bad brings that otherwise peerless fight down a peg. I wish developers would stop doing this. I don't like it with Commander O'Neill or Nile. It's okay with Burnt Ivory King, maybe the only case where I think it's actually kinda cool, but for the most part, I just think it's annoying game design. I would rather the boss just be harder than having to juggle ads. It's not that I can't do it, I just find it takes away from the enjoyment of the actual fight, which is what I'm there to experience. So yeah, for me, this fight is the worst. The boss itself is pretty shitty too, with it just being a worse Sif fight from Dark Souls 1. Next, we have Bloodborne. This game has a lot of pretty lackluster bosses. To preface, I like humanoid fights more than animal type fights, but in a game whose core design revolves around hunting beasts, it's safe to say that I wasn't a fan of many of the bosses in this game. I could honestly point to 5 or more boss fights that I just really didn't enjoy. But as you may have been able to guess from my disdain for Royal Rat Authority, Rom the Vacuous Spider takes the cake. It's not that it is a very hard boss, it's just so frickin' tedious. But the thing that really drove me over the edge with this boss was From Software actually reusing it as a final boss in a Chalice dungeon. I've already spoken at length in my Bloodborne review about how much I don't like Chalice dungeons as a whole, but then as I was painstakingly grinding them all out, which was something I already didn't want to do, I then came up against this boss for a second time and it sent me over the edge. At least in the main game, the arena you fight Rom in is quite massive. You have tons of space to move around and kite the spiders to deal with them. In the dungeon, the boss room is much more confined, which adds difficulty to the fight. The real difficulty though is just having the patience to take out each spider one by one. I don't mind a long boss fight if it's a war of attrition, just a tanky boss and you're going back and forth. This is just add, clear, rinse, repeat for 5 minutes straight, with about 5-5-second damage windows to hit the boss. That is not a good ratio of fighting the boss to fighting adds, at all. Like truly, the real challenge is just having the patience to put up with it, and I'm not that guy. I don't have patience like that. I love to optimize boss fights, so having to slowly take out ad after ad just drains me of my will to live. It's exactly how I felt with Demon Souls boss runbacks. They weren't hard. They were just so long, boring, and tedious that I would die from trying to rush through it because I can't be asked to kill the same enemies over and over and over again for no good reason. In my mind, I know that slow and steady wins the race, but my ADD gamer brain just wants to hit the boss with weapon. Ooh, chunk down health bar make brain feel good. Kill trash ads do not. Anyways, fuck this boss. Next up we have Dark Souls 3. I love a lot of the boss fights in Dark Souls 3. Like when I was going over the list of bosses, I couldn't believe how good a lot of the fights were. So this was honestly pretty tough for me to decide because as I looked at all my footage, I was like, damn, I really enjoyed all of these. Except for one. I hate to go with another gimmick boss, but man, Ancient Wyvern was just so annoying. In hindsight, I could have just ran by all the enemies and done the gimmick, but I was trying to take them all out every run. The amount of times I would get clipped through the wall by an ad's attack to die, like bro, it was so frustrating. Again, I know a gimmick boss is sort of a lame choice, but I think the boss roster in this game warrants it. Deacons of the Deep is sort of gimmicky also, and Curse Rotted Greatwood isn't the greatest fight, but I didn't get super frustrated or annoyed with those bosses like I did Ancient Wyvern. Like I genuinely still enjoyed figuring those fights out. Ancient Wyvern was just a bunch of ads to get through so that you could drop on its head. And I gotta say, when you actually do it, it's stylish as hell. And it was clear inspiration for stabbing the giant serpent in Sekiro, so that was cool to see the design inspiration, as I had actually played Sekiro before Dark Souls 3, so I really appreciated that. But yeah, all in all, if I were to replay Dark Souls 3, this would be the fight that I would dread the most. Much like Bed of Chaos, it would be a lot easier the second time around, but it would still feel utterly unsatisfying. Now we have Sekiro, and the easy answer would be to say that Sekiro has no bad bosses, and honestly, it's hard to know how to classify some of these enemies. Fextra Life shows Blazing Bull, for example, as a mini-boss, same with Chained Ogre, but to me, Chained Ogre is sort of the first boss that you face. So I could easily say Headless and call it a day because man, I hated fighting Headless more than any other enemy in the game. I'm just so bad at those fights. I also would have considered Snake Eyes Shirafuji as a boss, but I want it to be an actual boss, so we'll go with Fextra Life's definition. Because of that, I gotta go with Genichiro. Just kidding, I had you for a second, didn't I? No, gun to my head, if I had to pick a boss, and I'm not gonna cop out and do a gimmick boss, because the gimmick bosses in this game are even cool and have a lot of charm, so that really only leaves Corrupted Monk. Now again, I have to stress, this is the worst boss from each game. That is not to say Corrupted Monk is a bad boss whatsoever. I would rather fight Corrupted Monk over like a dozen bosses from Dark Souls 2 or Bloodborne. But the quality bar in Sekiro is just so damn high that for me, that's what I gotta pick. When I look at that boss list and think which fight I would least like to do again, it's Corrupted Monk. Something about that fight just never clicked with me like the others. All the other fights I felt like I had down pat. I mean, I beat the game 5 times back when I was playing it, but for whatever reason, I always struggled with Corrupted Monk. But not in a fun struggle kind of way like all the others, more of annoyed or frustrated struggle at times. Still though, I think it's a super cool boss and boss fight, but again, just the worst in a roster of all-time bangers. And finally, that brings us to Elden Ring. Having watched some Elden Ring YouTube lately, I see a lot of people hating on Concert or Dawn. Now, if you haven't noticed, I'm trying to stick to the base game bosses. In my favorites video, I actually included DLC, but that is because a lot of the DLC bosses are absolutely some of my favorites, so they definitely deserved a mention. But for Elden Ring, I want to stick to the base game. This game has so many bosses and lots of recurring ones like dragons, Erd Tree avatars, Deathrite birds, gargoyles. You get the picture. Tibia Mariners are super lame in my opinion, but they're easy as hell, so fighting them wasn't annoying like it was with some others. But when I look back on my playthrough and really think about a boss that just didn't click with me and that I wouldn't want to fight again on a repeat playthrough, only one comes to mind, and that is Estelle, Natural Born of the Void. For whatever reason, that boss just did not click with me. I just found it super hard to land hits to the head, and I also experienced that patented Souls camera jank a lot. But ultimately, what frustrated me the most was just how much trouble I had identifying its attacks, and that always bothers me. I love grinding away on a boss and learning the tells and how to counter each different attack. And while I could do this with Estelle enough to get through the fight, I never felt comfortable fighting that thing. I also really don't like how much it teleports away. I'm just not a fan of bosses doing that either. Just a lot of the fight doesn't click with me, and as I said, I would not look forward to fighting this thing again. And in classic Elden Ring fashion, they even reuse this boss in a dungeon just to make it even more annoying. So yeah, Estelle is the worst main boss in Elden Ring. And that is it for my list of my least favorite bosses across the Souls series. I can safely say that if all those bosses were removed from their respective games, that I would enjoy the game more as a result. Addition by subtraction, if you will. Outside of Corrupted Monk and Sekiro, Sekiro has no bad bosses. Remember that. Anyways, that's it. Comment down below with your least favorite bosses or your least favorite across the entire series. Like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more gaming content. Lastly, if you're still here, thanks so much for watching to the end. I appreciate it. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.